Tom Allen and Penn State's defense were simply outcoached by Bowling Green.
You are Locked On Nittany Lions, your daily podcast on the Penn State Nittany Lions. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
We learned quite a bit about this Penn State football team after a close call against Bowling Green, from the defensive struggles to Drew Allar's progression and improvement to still some things need to be worked out on the offensive side of things, even though I think that group is trending in the right direction. This is Locked On Nittany Lions. I'm your host, Zach Seyko, and thanks so much for making us your first listen and watch every single day. We are free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. And today's show is brought to you by 5-Hour Energy. Go to 5hourenergy.com and use promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. I'd really appreciate it if you left a like on this episode, leave a review if you're listening to it on the audio side, but more importantly, let me know your thoughts down in the comments section. Your takeaways from Penn State versus Bowling Green, as now the dust has settled. That was a very raw reaction from Beaver Stadium as Dylan and I, along with Zane, talked about it in the moment, Penn State versus Bowling Green, but just kind of looking through the box score, looking at specific plays, you start to make a little more sense of the game. And in the first half, simply put, Tom Allen and Penn State's defense were outcoached. Now, we'll begin with the defense and then, of course, go back to the offense here. But Tom Allen was outcoached. Bowling Green had its way offensively. You saw the first half result. It was 24-20, but that's what second half adjustments are for. And Tom Allen did make those second half adjustments. Bowling Green had the late field goal, but for the most part, Penn State's defense had shut them out in the second half. So no, it wasn't a full 4 quarters of Penn State's defense being outcoached, but Bowling Green, a MAC team that will contend for a conference title, certainly had its way in the first half. And why I'm so sure that Tom Allen and the defense had been outcoached in this sense was because the defensive players on Penn State's side of things did not play poorly. They did not play poorly. You look at PFF's game grades, the analytics, you watch specific plays itself, and you look back at it, and the players, yeah, sure, they made mistakes, but they weren't put in a position, the best position to succeed. Okay, so yes, players made mistakes here and there because that's going to happen. NFL, college, high school, doesn't matter. You're going to make mistakes as a player in a football game, but the coaches can help put you in a better position to succeed, and that wasn't happening a lot in the first half. A little bit in the second half, but clearly not as much because Penn State was able to turn things around. And overall, I mean, leading up throughout the week, saying things that I will stand by on this podcast. Tom Allen is a really good defensive coordinator. Bowling Green had put together a really good game plan. Both of those things can be true, but the defense did not get worse. They're not taking a step back in terms of overall talent. Penn State's defense in 2024 is in fact better than the 2023 group, so that leaves it up to debate. Was Manny Diaz that much better of a coordinator versus Tom Allen? Remember, this is game 2. This is what we're learning about the Penn State defense, is that like the offense being a quote unquote work in progress, you have to give the same kind of timeline to Penn State's defense too. That is a new defensive coordinator. You lost some veterans in that group, and you switch key players around, right? Abdul Carter moving to defensive end, that's a big deal. And you lose guys like Chop Robinson, Adisa Isaac, Curtis Jacobs. Okay, so that is going, and Kalen King, Daquan Hardy, right? All those guys were veteran players. Johnny Dixon too, I don't want to leave him out of that. Those were veteran players that you still need to make up for that in a sense. And we saw immediate progress right out of the gate against West Virginia. But I also want to apply the same standard here in the fact that Penn State's defense is a work in progress in its own right. Not as much of a work in progress, but it is going to, you have to get adjusted to the system. Same thing with Penn State's offense and Andy Kotelnicki's system, which has shown that I think it's ahead of its timeline. Manny Diaz didn't pitch shutouts for Penn State's defense right out of the gate. Remember, that was a shootout. I know that was a fairly talented Purdue team, veteran players that was on the road in West Lafayette. That's 31 points allowed by Manny Diaz and Penn State's defense in week one. Now, granted, Purdue versus Bowling Green in that sense. However, Bowling Green proved to not be a pushover. They have talented players. And right out of the gate, Penn State had no answer for the superstar in Harold Fannin Jr. You look at it, you go to the analytics, and you don't even need the analytics for this. You watch the film, Penn State had 10 different players try to cover that tight end for Bowling Green. 10, and he still had the kind of day that he did. So Bowling Green was just able to get what it wanted in the first half, but kudos to Tom Allen and the team, especially with having to adjust. KJ Winston is either, depending on who you ask, might be 1A or 1B on this Penn State defense in terms of top overall talent. You can make the argument is obviously who's better, Abdul Carter or KJ Winston in terms of value to this Penn State defense. Some people might tell you it is actually Winston. I'm going to still say it is Carter, but that's a 1A versus 1B debate. Winston goes out of the game with an undisclosed, what we presume, injury based on the way that James Franklin addressed it, and Penn State had to make adjustments. One of your best players is out for 3/4 of the game, and you're going to struggle immediately, especially when a guy like KJ Winston is responsible at times for covering a player like Harold Fannin Jr. So I know for a fact that, yes, Tom Allen and the defense were out-schemed, out-coached in the first half, but that's why the game doesn't end at the first half. They made the second half adjustments, and they did it without one of the best players on the team, period, and ended up winning the game. Now, the offense did bail them out, and that's why we're going to talk about them in the second and third segment, because the offense, I don't think, is getting enough credit to this point. And some people are applauding it, as they should, but the progress that has been made by Andy Kotelnicki's group is outstanding. Now, the pass rush has received a lot of criticism here, and it's easy to point out because 2 sacks against West Virginia, no sacks against Bowling Green. None. And that's kind of surprising because leading up to it, I said, hey, Bowling Green's offensive line isn't that great. They're okay for a MAC level team. Bowling Green does a lot of other things well, but the offensive line isn't one of their strong suits. And the Falcons proved otherwise. Again, 0 sacks from the pass rush. But why is that? Because the defensive line is actually really talented with Abdul Carter, Dennis Sutton, Zane Durant, Devontae Thomas, and then the depth behind them. I could list off everybody, right? Smith Vilbert and as well as Amin Vanover, but they weren't able to get home. The results weren't there. That has to do in part with Bowling Green's game plan. You can't get to the quarterback if you have a capable veteran that understands that he needs to get the football out in 2.5, 3 seconds, and Connor Bazelak did. Bowling Green had an initiative to get the football out of the quarterback's hands, so unless Abdul Carter, Superman, he got very close at times, and people are going to criticize Abdul Carter, but he was double-teamed quite a bit. Bowling Green gave him a lot of attention, and I'll go back to the analytics. PFF shows that Dennis Sutton and guys like Zane Durant, Devontae Thomas actually had admirable performances in terms of the pass rush. They were winning the assignments, but they couldn't get there because Connor Bazelak was getting rid of the football. So I hope people are understanding my point that, yes, the pass rush was there. They just needed that extra 1 second. Really, the difference was 1 second between Bazelak getting rid of the football for a completion. I think at that point, it's on, how do you adjust your coverage? Do you do a press? Do you try to disguise things there? To go through that game, that's probably what needed to have happened for Penn State's defense. And again, they made the adjustments. So those problems were there in the first half, but they were almost all but non-existent. They were very close to non-existent in the second half. Penn State was only rushing 4. They didn't have these all-out aggressive blitzes that a Manny Diaz traditional defense, and I think in time that may happen. But the 4-2-5 system in itself is going to be a work in progress. But Penn State's defense, this isn't sounding the alarm. It is a wake-up call by all means, and they definitely deserve some criticism. But it's good that Penn State was able to adjust on the fly and win the game in the second half, only holding Bowling Green to 3 points, and that field goal came late in the game after Penn State built back its lead. Now, I think the offense has done an incredible job to this point. Drew Aller's progression. Drew Aller does look like the quarterback that Penn State needs him to be. However, there are still serious question marks, and Penn State may need to, no, they do need to make a change on the offensive line. We'll get to the quarterback, the running backs, the wide receivers, and the O-line coming up here next on the show. And today's show is brought to you by 5 Hour Energy. You want to get in shape, but are you having trouble staying motivated? Make 5 Hour Energy shots part of your lifestyle and get the energy boost you need to get fit. We all know that sometimes you're not going to want to go to the gym, and that's okay. So take a 5 Hour Energy shot to give you that feeling, that alertness, so you can get to the gym. 5 Hour Energy is the brand hardworking people like you have trusted for over 20 years to give them the alert, energized feeling they need to get through a busy, hectic day. You'll always know where to find 5 Hour Energy shots right at the cash register at nearly every convenience, drug, or grocery store nationwide. Stock up on money-saving multi-packs to make sure you never run out of delicious, energizing 5 Hour Energy shots. If you go to 5hourenergy.com right now, that is 5hourenergy.com, and get a 5 Hour Energy product today, you can use my promo code LOCKEDONCFB to receive 20% off your order. This offer is only valid until September 30th on one order and cannot be used with other promotions. The code is also not good on subscription orders. Again, that's code LOCKEDONCFB for 20% off your order. So go to 5hourenergy.com today. Drew Aller is him, and I know it's only a 2-game sample. West Virginia, Bowling Green from the MAC conference, but Penn State's offense, night and day in comparison to 2023 and 2024, where the offense just looked like it was operating inside of a foam booth. And now Andy Kotelnicki has truly spread out the offense, is so creative that it keeps defenses on its toes. And the biggest beneficiary of this is Drew Aller. You can already see the confidence. He is attempting riskier throws because he understands the reward at the end of the day, and he's not attempting a lot of passes. This is a very balanced offense. It's not just like last year where Mike Yurcich was running the football dozens of times, and I get it. You have the running backs to do that, but you also have the 5-star quarterback that has the arm strength to throw it anywhere that he wants to. And Drew Aller has the pinpoint accuracy. What he was held back from, granted, he had the one mistake. I will address the one mistake on the interception. That's just a bad read. Cornerback, defensive back comes back underneath. Trey Wallace is open. He had some separation, but the ball was floated, and Wallace backpedaling into the end zone, his momentum's carrying him away, and the defensive back is right there to take it away. And that interception is costly in the end zone like that, and it's a good thing it didn't come back to bite Penn State in the rear end. But Drew Aller normally wouldn't take those kinds of throws. His eyes, he's keeping his eyes downfield. He's keeping plays alive. Bowling Green cannot bring him down. This is may I remind everyone that this is a 6'5", 235-pound quarterback. And for some reason, defensive linemen, blitzers, I know that Drew Aller did happen to be sacked a couple of times in this game, and we'll get to that. The offensive line does need to make a change here because of that performance. But Drew Aller was extending plays, able to make defensive linemen and blitzers miss, and he's this large quarterback that shouldn't be able to move the way that he does. He should not be able to slide around the pocket and move and roll out and throw on the run the way he does. You had a case of the drops. Amari Evans did not have his best day, had dropped a couple of passes, had that offensive, again, debatable pass interference. So Drew Aller in himself made the one mistake on the interception, but really played mistake-free football overall. Again, has that superstar caliber potential that I think is already on display, and Andy Kotelnicki is helping open things up in the offense. So to go along with that, so Drew Aller is him. Tyler Warren is also him. I won't go as far to say that, he is definitely the best tight end in the country. Certainly in the conversation for it, though. Top 5 easily, maybe even top 3. I think Tyler Warren, as far as a receiving threat, is one of the best tight ends that is going into next year's NFL draft. And it shows. He sets the single game record for receiving yards by a tight end in Penn State history on a day when I discussed previously, hey, what's going to happen when Trey Wallace is phased out of the offense effectively? The defense game plans for him. Mari Evans clearly doesn't have his best day, and Julian Fleming and Liam Clifford are absent from the offense. Well, Tyler Warren stepped up and then some. But you're only going to get away with that for so much. So this is where it kind of goes from, hey, here's the positive. Let's address the negative here and criticize a little bit. What happens when you face a defense that is not going to be, okay, they took away one asset, but what happens when they can limit both Wallace, both Warren? And the conversation flips to the wide receivers. Andrew Rapplier was out. Khalil Dinkins is coming back. So yeah, the tight ends are going to have to step up too, but I think it is on the wide receivers because of that veteran experience. So if Rapplier missed this game, hopefully the injury, or we presume it's an injury, right? We don't exactly have confirmation per usual. So you hope it's not a long-term thing. Luke Reynolds is still gradually going to become a better player. I mean, he's a true freshman. He's already been thrusted into game action already and is probably going to have his red shirt burned pretty soon here. But the wide receivers, Liam Clifford, has been around for a long time. Caden Saunders has been around for a long time. Julian Fleming has played a lot of college football despite not being at Penn State for a long time. And I know Saunders is dealing with bumps and bruises. They're using him only in the punt return game as of right now. I know he had the muff punt. Didn't cost Penn State anything. You just have to clean that up. There's really not a lot to analyze there. The wide receivers really have to step up because you can only get away with these kind of performances for so long. West Virginia's defense is not elite. Bowling Green's defense is not elite. What happens when you face and improve? And people are going to say, oh, but USC's defense is not elite. USC's defense is better than West Virginia's and Bowling Green's and anybody else that Penn State's going to face between now and that trip to Southern California. Ohio State's defense is elite. So what are you going to do when you have a defense in front of you that can take away multiple players at a time and not just one? There's got to be something that lights a spark in this group because the wide receivers are still letting Penn State down to an extent. But Andy Kotelnicki and his offensive system to open things up, allow the run game to be better. That's what Andy Kotelnicki's doing. He's made Drew Aller a better quarterback. He's made the running backs better running backs. And he's made Tyler Warren a better receiving threat and Trey Wallace for the moment and Amari Evans to an extent. But that's not enough in Big Ten play when you go up against the likes of Ohio State, USC. Hey, Wisconsin is going to be a very good defense when they get to Camp Randall. Okay, offensive one is one thing, but right now the Badgers do have a really good defense. And I wouldn't say that Washington's a pushover. I wouldn't say that Minnesota's a pushover either. Again, Big Ten Conference play, those experienced coaches and teams will make you pay for not having enough diversity on offense. So the wide receivers, again, somebody's got to break through. I imagine it's going to be a Julian Fleming or a Liam Clifford. Caden Saunders, again, dealing with those bumps and bruises. Tyseer Denmark, that would be a lot to ask of him, even though I think he will eventually be involved in the game plan by that mid part of the season, maybe later down the stretch. Again, think week 8, week 9, week 10. Better late than never, right? So it's going to have to be up to Fleming and Clifford, and hopefully Saunders can get back to 100%. So that's who it is on to really take this offense to the next level. I think Amari Evans is the key. If you can get him to have consistent performances, because we've seen him show up. He's been there. He's been a difference maker, even though there's been those controversial calls for offensive pass interference. Again, if a defensive back and a wide receiver are fighting for the football, that I don't understand if it's a 50-50 play, how you can call it one way or another. Okay, I see a contested catch and Amari Evans happens to come down with it. Why can't you call that defensive pass interference? I hope people are understanding my point there. So yes, Amari Evans is a crucial part of this, and I think the most valuable unsung hero in this case, but that doesn't mean that you can't have Fleming or Clifford step up sooner rather than later. And the offensive line. Andy Kotelnicki has made the offensive line better for then what it is, at least going into the season, but there are still some weak links, and that needs to change ASAP. Penn State has a bye week. They better figure it out, and we'll discuss what that is on the other side of this break. And today's episode is also brought to you by Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop. Earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. The average Ibotta user earns $256 per year. Now that could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, that flight you've been eyeing, or the fancy dinner that you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't really amount to much. With Ibotta, you earn cash back that you can withdraw to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. Simply add the offers in the app, upload your receipt, and voila, the money is yours. You can save on over 2,400 brands and shop at over 1,000 retailers, including your favorite grocery stores, Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, just to name some of the others. And right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE when you register. Just go to the App Store, Google Play Store, and download it for free, the free Ibotta app, to start earning cash back, and use that code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. That is IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKEDONCOLLEGE. So Penn State needs to make a change on the offensive line, and it needs to happen soon. And that change is Drew Shelton. And this was something that I talked about at length on this show, that the starting group on the offensive line was going to be Drew Shelton, Vanga Ioane, Nick Dawkins, Sal Wormley, and Anthony Donko. And Drew Shelton was the player to watch because I didn't think his job was safe. Drew Shelton, again, performed admirably as a true freshman when he had to come in, and when Olu Fashanu had missed the remainder of the season, and played well as a true freshman. But then he bounced around. Is he a backup left tackle? Oh, he's going to challenge Caden Wallace at the right tackle spot, and you didn't really see a lot of him last season, and that's understandable. Those are two NFL caliber players. But there wasn't this excessive amount of positive intel and a lot of word from the coaches or James Franklin, because they're usually good about promoting players that they think have stepped up, whether that's, for example, a Zach Wheatley. Well, Drew Shelton didn't have that kind of discourse around him. And then you look at the analytics, you watch some of the tape that's been put together over the past two seasons, and it's like, okay, there are some struggles here. Well, Drew Shelton might be getting his time at left tackle might be down to seconds at this point, or might even be past that, because in the middle of the Bowling Green game, he was benched for Nolan Rucci. And while Nolan Rucci performed a little bit better, it wasn't perfect, but it happened. It was better than Drew Shelton's. Drew Shelton had an okay game against West Virginia. Did well against the pass, and did well in pass blocking, pass protection. When it came to run blocking, not so great. Analytics back it up. And then same thing. Overall, Penn State's offensive line did better as a group run blocking. But you capitalized on the 3-3-5 system, the defensive system that Bowling Green runs. Okay, so they're going to be susceptible to big run plays there. And you have Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen. So those two running backs are going to make up for a good amount of the shortcomings that the offensive line has at the moment. But to go and bench Drew Shelton against Bowling Green, I think, is a pretty telling statement. Penn State has a bye week. Then Penn State plays Kent State. So I would think that this is a 2-week evaluation, a reevaluation. Drew Shelton, you're on the hot seat. Is Nolan Rucci going to push him? Do you consider moving Anthony Donko over to left tackle? JB Nelson is that Swiss Army knife that James Franklin said can play anywhere. Guard spots, tackle spots. What is this going to look like? I've seen some criticism from Nick Dawkins floating around there. Nick Dawkins actually had a good game. Nick Dawkins has actually performed better, had a bounce back game, because again, wasn't perfect against West Virginia. You would have liked to have seen better out of a redshirt senior captain, and he responded. He played well. He did his job against Bowling Green. But again, it is Bowling Green. They are not the best defense that Penn State's going to face. However, Drew Shelton certainly had those issues, and that is why Penn State felt it needed to make a change, because he was not having any success in run blocking or in pass protection, which I think is his better attribute. I think he's a better pass blocker. But Drew Aller might see bumps and bruises of his own. He can't be getting chased around like that. I'm glad that he can dodge defenders left and right as a 6'5", 235-pound quarterback, but he shouldn't have to be doing that on a too consistent basis. Sure, defenses are going to get home and get pressure eventually on Aller from time to time, but it shouldn't have been as apparent as it was, and Drew Shelton was a big part in that, and that's why Penn State felt it needed to make a change. So now you have 2 weeks to figure out if you can motivate Drew Shelton to really clean up his performance and be that left tackle that they think he can be when they recruited him and had him go in, again, back up as a true freshman to Olu Fashanu. So it's not that they don't trust him, but as of right now, the results are going to force Penn State to make a change if he can't reprove himself in practice and against competition, Kent State. If you don't have a good game against Kent State. But now I think Nolan Rucci is going to challenge, is going to push there, and you're going to see a rotation. So this is where the offensive line officially starts to make its change. Shelton is not a guaranteed starter at left tackle. I think they're going to rotate them in and see who has the better performance based on practice. But in that Kent State game, you're going to see probably 2, maybe 3 different people be the left tackle against the Golden Flashes, because you have to have it figured out against for Illinois, UCLA, and especially those gauntlet teams that are coming up mid to late October, early November, right? And overall, the offensive line has been better than what it was anticipated to be, but it's still not perfect, and it's far from it, of course. Pass blocking is good enough to this point. Run blocking, Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen have made up for that. Drew Aller has made up for it. Those 3 players, and Bo Prabula, I don't think got a lot. He didn't get a lot of action against Bowling Green, but those 3 players have made the offensive line look better in the ground game, and Andy Kotelnicki able to scheme some things up to open up running lanes, and then just pure overall talent. Like I said, Aller, that is not schemed. Aller dodging defensive tackles and defensive ends and blitzers is by no means the game plan there. So that's where they're kind of making up for the offensive line in a case, and that's why it's a team effort. It's not all on one, the tight ends, the offensive line, the running backs, the quarterbacks. You're going to have to bail. The offense bailed out the defense against Bowling Green. We know this. And yes, changes were made, but the offense came up big when the defense had let them down. And that's going to happen. You're going to need to be able to complement each other week in, week out, because you might not have your best day. And that's what happened against Bowling Green in the case of the defense. So the offensive line, like I said, the offense is trending in the right direction. I think the O-line has performed better than what was initially thought. Singleton and Allen really do look that dynamic duo. Drew Aller is becoming the quarterback that Penn State has always needed him to be. You have a true clear-cut number 1 wide receiver, but you have to clean up the run blocking. You can't let left tackle be a serious question mark, be a revolving door there, because that is Drew Aller's blind side. And then the offense is, then what's going to happen to the confidence if there's pressure in his face all the time? How's the offense going to operate? Because it starts up front. It starts in the trenches. And just about every football coach has said that and would agree with that statement, that it begins up front. We'll see what Penn State does to make that change, but just be aware that these next 2 weeks are an evaluation period for left tackle. I think everybody else is going to stay status quo. Like I said, Nick Dawkins is receiving unjust criticism. I thought he had a good game against Bowling Green. Sal Wormley has looked very good. Vanga Ioane has looked very good. But that doesn't mean that Penn State can't make any changes. Ioane can play center. Cooper Cousins has performed well as a true freshman. Anthony Donko, I think, has had his slip-ups too, but this is his first time being a full-time starter at right tackle. And I think, again, he's performing above his expectations to this point on the timeline of his development. So you don't just completely wipe away what you have at offensive line, but you got to start with one change and then just keep an eye on things to see if you need to make any other adjustments to make sure that you can keep the ground game as effective as it is and keep Drew Aller upright so that he can continue to develop into the quarterback that he can be. That's going to do it for this edition of Locked On Nittany Lions. Again, I'd really appreciate a like on this episode, but more importantly, I want to know your thoughts down in the comments section, your biggest takeaways from Penn State versus Bowling Green. If you're not already, become an everydayer. Subscribe to Locked On Nittany Lions on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. And we'll go through the offense. We'll go through the defense a little more throughout the week. There's no football game this weekend with the bye week, but Penn State can still fix a lot of things in this week of preparation and time of rest before they get back into game action. So for all the latest conversations around your favorite Penn State sports teams, keep it right here on Locked On Nittany Lions. And again, thanks so much for making Locked On Nittany Lions your first listen and watch every single day. For your second listen, check out Locked On College Football with host Spencer McLaughlin. Now college football is truly back in season, and he's talking about everything, recapping games, previewing the next week's slate of games, and talks to individual hosts to get the true inside perspective. I've been a guest on that show, and he has other guests from around the country talking about their specialties with the specific team. So everything you need to know about college football, that's why it's called Locked On College Football. Go check it out on YouTube and wherever you get your podcasts. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.